For a long time, I thought what separated the top 1% from the rest of the world was something unreachable. Access, opportunities, connections. But when I started studying and spending time with women who actually made it there, I realized something. It wasn't some massive turning point. It was small habits, repeated consistently. They didn't wait to have millions in the bank to act differently. They started right where they were, with what they had, but with the mindset of someone who knew exactly where they were headed. And their daily habits did the rest, cleared out what drained them, strengthened what supported them, and opened the way to the next level. When I started applying these habits, my life didn't flip overnight, but I did, and that's what flipped my life. If that hit home for you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let's go. Because adopting conscious habits is the first step to rising above average. Habit 1. They wake up before the world and create before reacting. For a long time, I used to wake up in a rush. The alarm would go off, and within minutes I was already drowning in demands, messages, notifications, other people's expectations. I started the day reacting, and ended it exhausted, like I'd never been in control of anything. When I started studying women in the top 1%, I noticed something simple but powerful. They wake up before the world. And not just to get a head start, but to take up internal space before the external world barges in. They wake up early. They create silence. They write, meditate, plan. They cultivate presence and intention in those first few hours. Adopting this habit turned me inside out. It was uncomfortable at first. But when I saw how much more I could produce, how clearly I could think, and how focused I could act, I got it. The early hours became mine, and when the world started yelling, I was already grounded. I had already done something for me, already knew my focus, already connected with who I wanted to be. Today, waking up early isn't about productivity. It's about sovereignty. Comment, my days start with me. If you've also decided to stop starting your day for others and take your space with intention. Habit 2. They don't skip the clarity step. Before any achievement, there's a decision. And before the decision, there's clarity. But I spent years trying to fix my life without even knowing what I actually wanted to build. I had scattered goals, desires tangled up with fear, and a bunch of ideas that didn't talk to each other. The result, exhaustion, confusion, and a constant feeling of being busy but getting nowhere. That's when I noticed a pattern in women who are part of the top 1%. They know exactly what they want. And they don't confuse clarity with rigidity. They're not afraid to refine the plan, but they know the next step. They know what's non-negotiable. They know where they're headed. And that changes everything. When I started practicing intentional clarity, my life started aligning. I began writing every day what I wanted to experience, repeating to myself where I was and where I was going. And with that, my decisions got quicker. My no's got stronger. My presence more powerful. Clarity is what separates effort from direction. And it was this simple habit, looking with honesty and naming with precision, that started to change the game for me. Comment, I act with clarity. If you've also realized you can't build wealth while living in doubt. Habit 3. They treat their mind like a luxury asset. For a long time, I nourished my body and left my mind starving. I lived on autopilot, jumping from one stimulus to another, absorbing whatever came my way. Social media, random conversations, borrowed worries. By the end of the day, I felt drained and didn't understand why. Until I started paying attention to something fundamental. Women in the top 1% protect their minds like a valuable asset. They don't watch just anything. They don't talk about just anything. They don't listen to just anyone. They filter. They rigorously select what comes in, because they know how much that impacts what comes out. When I started doing the same, I realized how much mental junk I had been distracting myself with. I swapped repetitive news for books that expand, swapped comparisons for reflections, swapped noise for silence. And in that silence, I heard myself again. I started thinking clearly, creating freely. Today, my mind is the most valuable space in my life. It's where my ideas, my decisions, my wealth are born. Comment, my mind is my priority, if you've also decided to shield what feeds your thoughts every day. Habit 4. They treat focus as protection, not effort. For a long time, I saw focus as a struggle. I forced concentration, tried to juggle 1,000 things with discipline, but was constantly pulled by distractions. Social media, notifications, other people's demands. And in the end, my energy was always scattered, and so were my results. Until I realized something simple that completely changed the way I operate. Women in the top 1% don't treat focus as a sacrifice. They treat it as protection. Focus for them is a boundary. It's clarity about what deserves attention and the courage to ignore the rest. I started testing this code. Instead of trying to do everything at once, I started asking, what truly matters today? And from that answer, I'd reorganize everything: schedule, conversations, priorities. I eliminated the excess and discovered that focus isn't what exhausts you. What exhausts you is trying to please everyone and still meet all your own expectations. Today, my focus feels light because it comes from awareness, not pressure. And when your energy is fully aimed in one direction, results inevitably follow. Comment: my focus is my protection. If you've also decided to stop spreading yourself thin and start showing up for real. Habit 5. They maintain a minimum standard of excellence. Even on ordinary days, I used to think that growing meant giving your all every single day. I believed that to get there, I had to always be motivated, always strong, always at my best. But not every day is like that. And on those meh days, I would just let things slip. Skipped routines, delivered the bare minimum, made excuses. Then I noticed a powerful detail among women in the top 1%. They maintain a minimum standard of excellence, even when they're on basic mode. They don't rely on motivation. They have structure. They know there will be slower days, but they still don't abandon themselves. They respect the pace, but not at the cost of the standard. That changed me. I established what I call a non-negotiable minimum. Small but firm actions I stick to regardless of mood, weather, or circumstances. It's what keeps my identity alive even on gray days. And when those days pass, I'm still in the game, without needing to start from scratch. Excellence isn't about perfection. It's about responsibility to what you want to build, every single day. Comment: I keep my standard, even on tough days. If you've also realized that consistency matters more than bursts of intensity. Habit 6. They learn to sell value before selling a product. For a long time, I thought selling was about convincing. I'd try to highlight benefits, offer discounts, explain every little detail of what I offered. But deep down, I wasn't convinced of the value myself, and people could feel that. Only when I started observing women who build real wealth did I see the mistake. They don't sell a product. They sell value. They position themselves with authority. They show why it transforms. And most importantly, they believe in what they're offering. This became one of the most powerful habits I adopted. I started valuing what I delivered before expecting others to. Stopped begging for attention and started creating perception. I studied, refined my offer, leveled up my communication, and realized that value isn't explained, it's perceived. Women in the 1% sell effortlessly because they live what they teach, practice what they share, and aren't afraid to take a stand. Today, before offering anything, I deliver presence. I deliver truth. And that alone already sells. Comment: I create value before offering. If you've also understood that consistency matters more than intensity and bursts. Habit 7. They treat money with ease, not tension. For a long time, talking about money made me uncomfortable. Even when I wanted to earn more, I felt guilty about it. Afraid of seeming greedy, afraid of seeming arrogant. And without realizing, I treated money like a burden, something distant, almost forbidden. But when I started spending time with women who truly prosper, I saw a striking difference. They talk about money with ease, with presence, with naturalness. Money for them isn't taboo. It's just another topic. It's a tool, it's energy, it's a consequence of posture. Understanding this set me free. I started facing money head on, talking about it more maturely, looking at my numbers, setting real goals, planning with clarity. No fear, no shame. The more natural money became in my life, the less it haunted me. And that's when I realized, it's not just about how much comes in, but how you relate to it. Today, money is welcome. It's respected, it's directed, it's celebrated. Comment: money is a natural topic for me. If you've also decided to stop hiding from it and start treating it as part of your greatness. Habit 8. They rely more on routine than motivation. For a long time, I waited to feel motivated before taking action. If I woke up excited, I got things done. If I felt tired or insecure, I'd postpone. Living like that, my progress was inconsistent, unstable, and frustrating. It was only when I stopped romanticizing motivation that I understood what really sustains women in the top 1%. They have routine. Simple, clear, repeated routines. They don't wake up waiting to feel in the mood. They wake up and do, because they already decided in advance. This habit taught me to trust the process more than the feeling. I started with small things: fixed times, daily commitments, visible organization. And little by little, everything around me began to align. It was routine that built my discipline that created my results, and results that fueled my motivation. not the other way around. Today I know, if you only act when you feel like it, you'll never build anything lasting. But if you act out of decision, you change everything. Comment: my routine sustains my growth. If you've also realized that what you repeat shapes who you become. Habit 9. They prioritize environments that raise their internal standards. I used to stay in certain environments out of habit, out of affection, loyalty, or fear of standing out. But every time I grew a little, I felt like I had to explain myself. I downplayed my results to avoid bothering anyone, hid my plans so I wouldn't seem full of myself, and without realizing, my standards started dropping again. It was only when I allowed myself to observe the patterns of women who truly thrive that I understood. They're intentional about their environment. They choose who they spend time with. They listen carefully. They filter what they internalize. They don't feel guilty for growing. And they don't keep people around who sabotage that growth. I started taking a firmer stance. Distanced myself from conversations that pulled me down. Chose to be in places that challenged me to think bigger, act better, stay faithful to my vision. And in that process, my internal standard changed. Today, I demand more from myself, not out of pressure, but because I'm surrounded by examples of what's possible. Environment shapes identity, and protecting that isn't selfish. It's self-awareness. Comment: my environment reflects my next level. If you've also realized that being around vision is part of the build. Habit 10. They master the basics before chasing the extraordinary. I used to be driven by urgency. I wanted to skip steps, be different, be original in everything. But deep down, my foundation was fragile. Disorganized routines, messy finances, lack of consistency. And still, I wanted outlier results. It was only when I took a hard look at women in the top 1% that I saw the truth. They are extraordinary because they master the basics. They have financial control. They take care of their bodies. They honor commitments. They do the simple things with excellence, every day. They're not chasing magic formulas. They're polishing what most people overlook. When I chose to apply this habit, everything started to unlock. I went back to the basics, organized my finances with clarity, created a minimum self-care routine, set schedules, systems, boundaries. And the curious part? Once the basics became part of me, the extraordinary started showing up naturally. Because the extraordinary doesn't grow from chaos. It grows from order. Today, I revisit my foundation often, because I know it's what holds up everything still to come. Comment: I strengthen my foundation every day. If you've also realized that solid results come from solid structure. Habit 11. They say no without guilt and with direction. For a long time, I said yes out of fear. Fear of disappointing, of seeming arrogant, of being excluded. I accepted commitments that drained me, helped when I wasn't available, stretched myself to support demands that weren't even mine. And by the end of the day, I was tired, frustrated, and far from what truly mattered. The turning point came when I started noticing a clear pattern among women in the top 1%. They say no naturally. They don't apologize for prioritizing what makes sense. They don't over-explain. They don't carry guilt for protecting their energy. Learning to say no was one of the most liberating decisions I've ever made, because it gave me back time, focus, and presence. Today, I only say yes to what brings me closer to my vision. Not out of arrogance, but out of responsibility. Because I know every yes takes up space, and space is a resource. And if I fill mine with what doesn't move me, there's no room left for what builds me. I've learned that saying no is an act of loyalty to the woman I'm becoming. Comment: my no is part of my growth. If you understand that setting boundaries doesn't push people away, it gives you direction. Habit 12. They don't wait to be ready to start. I missed many opportunities waiting to be ready. I thought I needed to know more, have more time, more security, more validation. Always something more. Meanwhile, days passed, and I stayed stuck in the same place, full of unexecuted ideas. Until I realized, women who actually build wealth don't wait to feel ready. They decide and start, even with fear, even with doubt, even without a guarantee of success. They understand that movement creates clarity, that starting imperfect is better than planning forever, and that it's in the doing that confidence is born. When I adopted this mindset, everything changed. I started without knowing everything, with the resources I had, with the courage I could muster that day, and each step confirmed that yes, it was possible, that no one shows up ready. We shape ourselves in the process. Today I act first, and learn along the way, because I've learned that readiness is an illusion, and if you want to go far, you have to start, even without the full map. Comment: I act before I'm ready. If you've also chosen to stop waiting for permission and start paving your own way. Habit 13. They invest before they feel secure. For a long time, I only spent money when I felt secure. I waited until there was extra, waited for certainty, waited for the perfect moment. But that moment never came. Because absolute security doesn't exist, only decisions do. Then I noticed a clear pattern in women in the top 1%. They invest before having all the guarantees. Of course, they're not reckless with money, but they also don't wait for ideal conditions. They know that true investment brings discomfort, because it shifts your mindset and repositions your identity. The first time I invested without feeling ready, I was shaking. But from that moment on, I started moving differently. Because when you invest in yourself, you automatically raise your level of commitment to your vision. You begin to take yourself more seriously. This habit became my new benchmark. If I only invest when there's extra, I never grow. If I only move with 100% certainty, I stay where I am. Today, I don't wait for extra to invest in me. I put money where I want to grow, because I know investment comes before expansion, not after. Comment: I invest in my next level. If you've also realized that waiting for surplus is the slowest way to grow. Habit 14. They take responsibility for what they feel, think, and do. For a long time, I blamed the outside world. It didn't work because of someone else. I feel this way because of that thing. If that changes, then I'll be able to move forward. It was subtle, but constant. And while I outsourced my reality, I stayed stuck in the same cycle. Then I started closely observing the women who were truly transforming their lives. They take full ownership. Feelings, actions, thoughts. Not as blame, but as power. They don't wait for the world to change. They change what's inside, and the world responds. This habit takes courage, because it's easier to point fingers than look in the mirror. But it's also what sets you free the most. When I stopped justifying and started owning, everything became clearer. The pain of recognition was replaced by the relief of knowing I was in control. If a thought limited me, I changed it. If an emotion trapped me, I processed it. If an action didn't work, I adjusted. Today, I don't run from what's mine. I face it. Because I know that everything I change on the inside shows up on the outside. Comment: I take full responsibility for what I build, if you've also decided to stop pointing and start steering your own direction. Habit 15. They use solitude as a tool, not a sentence. There were times when solitude scared me. I felt an odd emptiness when conversations no longer fulfilled me, when certain bonds naturally faded, when I realized I was changing and not everyone would come along. In those moments, I'd question myself. Am I on the right path? Is it worth growing if it means losing? But as I observed women who had actually built something solid, I noticed they don't run from solitude. They turn solitude into fertile ground. They understand that sometimes silence is part of the process, that not every expansion comes with company, and that deep clarity only emerges when you're truly present with your own voice. It was in that space, free from distractions, that I began to hear what truly mattered. I made more authentic plans, took more mature decisions, strengthened my roots. Today, I don't confuse solitude with isolation. I know that to grow, sometimes you have to walk alone. Not out of rejection, but out of construction. The woman I want to become demands at times silence and a fresh start, and I've learned to honor that. Comment: I grow even when I'm alone, if you've also turned solitude into the soil for your next version. Habit 16. They don't argue with reality. They act on it. For a long time, I resisted what was. I pretended financial messes would sort themselves out, ignored signals from my body, complained about what was hard, but stayed there, repeating the same pattern, as if denying reality would change the facts. But it doesn't. It only drains you. And observing women who truly build wealth, I noticed they don't argue with reality. They face it and act. They don't romanticize the problem. They don't waste energy debating what already is. They look, assess, and make decisions. With clarity. With maturity. With self-respect. This habit changed my life. I started looking head-on at the numbers, the choices, the gaps. And instead of criticizing myself, I adjusted. One step at a time. Gently but firmly. Accepting reality isn't giving up. It's an act of courage. Because only those who accept what is can transform what will be. Today, my life isn't perfect, but it's conscious. And because of that, it's moldable. Comment: I act on what's real. If you've also stopped running from the truth and started building from it. Habit 17. They live as if they already are and become. I used to think I had to wait for the result before acting like the woman I saw in my mind. The wealthy one, the confident one, the centered light one. I imagined that one day, when everything was right, then I'd feel ready to be her. But that day never came. Because in reality, the world only responds with coherence when you act with coherence. That's what I learned from the women in the top 1%. They live as if they already are, and that's how they become. They don't wait for the perfect scenario. They don't need validation. They hold the posture, the gaze, the tone, and the decisions based on who they've already chosen to be, even if the external hasn't caught up yet. This habit became my compass. Every day, before I leave the house, before I speak, before I make a decision, I ask myself, is this aligned with the woman I'm becoming? If the answer is no, I recalibrate. Because my future isn't just an idea, it's a daily construction. Today, I live as if I already am, and because of that, I'm becoming. Comment, I act as who I already am. If you've also realized that identity isn't something you wait for, it's something you uphold. If you've read this far, you've probably realized there's no magic. There are choices, small daily quiet ones. These 17 habits aren't ready-made formulas, but they are real patterns. Ones I've seen, tested, and lived. And that changed how I move, inside and out. You don't have to apply everything at once, but you do have to start. With awareness, with respect for your pace, and with the determination of someone who's decided they won't live an average life anymore. The woman you want to be is already within you. She just needs space. A decision. Consistency. Comment. I apply these habits with intention. If you've also chosen to step out of autopilot and build your top 1%. And of course, if this content flipped a switch for you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with another woman who's ready to live on the next level.